evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of College Football Tuesday. And boy, oh boy, that's all I can say. We got a lot to get to. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Zach McKinnell of the Blue Bloods. And Zach, believe me, we have an unbelievable show tonight. We got Steve Wiseman, the sports writer at the Durham Herald Sun, who covers the ACC, predominantly Duke University. And then we're going to have later on Brent Young, who's been on before, who's a contributor to the Bearcat Journal. He covers the Cincinnati Bearcats. Obviously, a lot to talk to about him. But let's go ahead and start off the show. First of all, want to thank so many different people for having us on their platforms. We want to thank tonight Facebook Live. We want to thank Twitter. We want to thank YouTube. We are now on Northeast Streaming Sports as well. We are on Roku. We are on Spotify and all those other networks as well. We are on Instagram tonight. We are just blowing it up. Just tells you how much of an impact you fans out there that watch our show or listen to our show has had on this show. And I know on behalf of myself and Zach, we want to thank you very, very much for all of your support so far this year. We're going to start out, the first thing, probably the most important thing, was the top four in the voting in the coaches poll, college football playoff poll, whatever the heck you want to call it. When you look at this, you see Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, and Cincinnati. And I don't think there was any question, Zach, about this, that when these games were finalized and you knew the four teams that were going to be in it, there was no way, and you know what, that the committee was going to make Alabama play Georgia in the first round of the playoffs. There was just no way they were going to let that happen. The only way they were going to meet if it was for the championship. When you look at these top four, anything to you that seems incorrect, or do you think the committee did a pretty good job with the way they went ahead and ranked them?
I mean, I think ultimately it was fine. I mean, I think like you said, the four teams was clear as soon as Oklahoma State lost, as soon as Alabama won, and as long as Michigan and Cincinnati won their games, it was going to be these four teams. I mean, Notre Dame had a great season. No way they were going to pass up Cincinnati. You look at Ohio State, 2 losses. They were out of it unless pure chaos happened. Baylor, even with 2 losses as the Big 12 champ, needed a lot to happen if they were going to find their way in. I think the committee got the 4 teams correct. I mean, I think the only issue anyone could have would be how the teams are ranked. I mean, personally, when Alabama beat Georgia like they did, I think they deserved that 1 seed.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, and I mean, Michigan put on a show against Iowa. And when you look, I mean, if it would have been flipped where Michigan was 1, Alabama was 2, and then maybe even Cincinnati above Georgia, I think that would have been fine as well. But for me, I think they got the rankings right. I think they got the 4 teams right. And this year was the first year we really didn't have a lot of drama regarding which 4 teams were going to be in the playoffs.
Zach, how important is this for a team like Cincinnati that's not in a Power 5 division to make the playoffs? And what does this do for other non-Power 5 schools?
I mean, I think it at least gives them hope that they're going to get in the playoffs. I mean, eventually, hopefully, it will expand to 12 teams like they've been talking. But until then, it gives them a hope that if they can have as consistent of a successful run as what Cincinnati had over these past 2.5, really 3 years, then it's going to give them a shot at the playoffs. And I mean, it still took all the right things happening. Ohio State had to lose 2 games. You had to have the Big 12 champ have 2 losses. You had to have the Pac-12 taken out of it. Everything happened right, but at least there's a path now. And now the number one thing too, and I think the impact stretches beyond the group of 5. How about the Big 12 looking now? Everyone said, oh, that's not going to be a Power 5 conference once they lose Oklahoma and Texas. Well, now they have a college football playoff contender in Cincinnati coming down the pipeline, along with Houston, who was a top 20 team, along with BYU, who recently was in the college football playoff conversation last year. And you have a UCF team, which was really the martyr of the group of fives in the playoffs back in 2017. So I think this has far-reaching effects for even the Big 12, where now the perception of that conference may not suffer as much as it would have initially, as much as we initially thought when they were going to lose Oklahoma and Texas moving forward.
Now, a little bit later on the show, not only are we going to preview the Alabama-Cincinnati game and the Michigan-Georgia game, which will be held on New Year's Eve, actually. One of the games beginning at 3:30, one beginning, I believe, around 7 o'clock. So a busy, busy day on the 31st. And we'll talk about that. Actually, I want to talk about one thing before we get to something else. But, Zach, now each of these teams have about 3 weeks off before they play each other. And I understand finals come into place when they're trying to figure this out. These kids are still students. But 3 weeks off, do you think that's too much time for a team to be off, to be able to come out and they'll give their best effort, but how coherent will they be and cohesive will they be on the field being off for 3 weeks?
I mean, as long as they all have the same layoff, I don't think it's really an issue. Now, if one team had like a 3-week layoff and the other one had like a week layoff, that might, bring into some, ethical, consideration. But for me, I think 3 weeks is good, because what you don't want to happen is a team like Georgia coming into the playoffs beat up, get beaten the first round because they had injuries that another team didn't have. I think 3 weeks allows all these teams to regather themselves after a long regular season. They get to be healthy for 3 weeks, and it gives everyone a fair time to game plan for the game. And I think what it does is, one, like I said, it evens the playing field with injuries. Two, it allows coaches to play more of a factor in how the game plays out, because good coaches for 3 weeks of preparation will have a great game plan. So I think you're going to see, that's why you always see the top coaches win in the playoffs. And then three, ultimately, it gives everyone just like a small breather after the season. We get to gear up for bowl week, and also you get 3 weeks to build the anticipation, because you need 3 weeks to build the hype and the commercials and the photo shoots for the Cincinnati Bama game, the Georgia Michigan game, and it gives a lot of these programs time to build the anticipation, which will only increase the revenue ultimately and increase the visibility and the clout of the student athletes that are going to be involved in the game. So I don't mind the 3-week layoff at all. If it was 2 weeks, I really wouldn't care either. But I do think that there needs to be a small layover due to, like you said, finals week, also recovery. And also, I think game planning needs to be such a big part in these games, because we want the best coaches, the best teams to ultimately win the national championship. And so I think it kind of puts everyone on an even pedestal, if you ask me.
And like I said, we'll preview those two games a little bit later in the show. And then we're also going to recap some of the games that made these rankings possible that had to be played this week. And like we said, Alabama won a big game. Michigan won a big game. Cincinnati. We'll talk about all those. But before we get to that, some other news in college football. And there's news every single day. I mean, I think there's been more coaching changes than there are states in the U.S. this year. But, the one that might have surprised, and we talked about this last week, I remember on the show, and I said, what do you think the fate of Manny Diaz is at Miami? And I remember, you thought there was no way, and understandably so. First, let's talk about Manny Diaz first being let go. And then I want to talk about, Zach, the way he was let go, where they already had the coach in place who was taking over even before they terminated Manny Diaz. Hit on both those. First, talk about what do you think was, and they even made it clear, if Cristobal didn't take that job, Manny Diaz would have kept his job. So basically, they wanted to find out if this guy's going to take the job or not. But in return, it really was not necessarily the most tactful or ethical or moral thing to do to Manny Diaz. Talk about the firing. What does this do for Miami who has a real stud at quarterback they found at Van Dyke. Talk about the program and talk about how it happened.
Yeah, I mean, it really came down to, they're hiring a new athletic director. And I think they just wanted a complete fresh start within the program based on, some of the people I talked to. And then, the way they let him go, I thought was a little weird. Now, on my show, I had some Miami fans say that, man, this is just a business and that, it's nothing. They said it's no different than a player taking a starting job of one of the starters if they're not performing well. I think it's a little bit different than that. But for me, the weird part wasn't that they ultimately wanted to replace him. That's fine because hiring Kristen Ball is a slam dunk hire. That's a great hire to get into your program based on his success at Oregon, based on his success at FIU, based on his success as the recruiting coordinator at Bama and the O-line coach. But if you were ready to move on from DIAZ, why wouldn't you just fire him? Because for me, I feel like it was more of a risk if, let's say, Kristen Ball doesn't take the job. Now you have a pissed off Manny Diaz that doesn't trust the upper management, that the players don't think the university trusts them. That's going to tear apart your recruiting. That's going to tear apart your team morale, your coaching staff morale. It's going to tear the athletic department in from the inside. And for me, if you wanted to make a change, fire Manny Diaz and go find you the future face of the program. Maybe you don't get Kristen Ball, but there's some great young assistants that you probably could have hired to come in and give a new fresh face to the Miami football program. The way it was done was kind of shady. In my opinion, I thought they should have handled it a lot better. And I thought the fact that the story leaked as early as it did and that they gave him a deadline and still weren't communicating with Manny Diaz what was going on, I think that was a huge problem.
Yeah, and definitely do, and we'll see how this all plays out. But another vacancy that still has to be decided upon is obviously Duke University's is still open, and our next guest, I'm so happy to bring him in. I listen to him a lot. He's on WFNZ every week here in the Charlotte area. But we're going to go ahead and bring in sports writer at the Durham Herald Sun. He covers the ACC, mainly Duke, and we'll go ahead and bring him in right now. Let me see if I can. There he is. Steve, how you doing today, sir?
Good, Larry. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Steve, let me ask you this right off the bat. First of all, thanks for coming on. We really do appreciate that. I listened today and I heard you report earlier today, and it kind of was a shock to me at first that Duke University is in possible talks with Jason Garrett, the offensive coordinator of the New York Giants, for a possible head coaching job. And I want you to, maybe you can elaborate on what you heard, but I want to ask you, where's the sense in all this? And I don't mean that disrespectfully towards Duke. Jason Garrett was a great offensive coordinator, great coach in the NFL, but here's a guy that has no recruiting experience, which is going to be a major thing that Duke needs from their next head coach, especially in the ACC. And he just doesn't know I don't think he has any college coaching experience. What is your thoughts on that, and what are you hearing?
Yeah, that's all true. And that's why he's more on the periphery of this search than in the main focus because of his lack of college experience. Now, he played quarterback at Princeton, which is important to the people at Duke who are doing the hiring because they need somebody that has a background in that kind of academics if you're going to recruit people to come to Duke. That's the reality of it. So that's neat. I mean, he obviously it would be a big splash. The guy has head coach of the Cowboys for 11 years and recently with the Giants, but he's been fired from his last two jobs. So that's sort of knocks against him, right? But really where that comes from is he and Coach K are very close. And I've been covering Duke since 2010, and I've seen him come to Cameron for basketball games in the winter on numerous occasions. He brought Tony Romo with him a few times. Spent time around the Duke program, basketball I'm talking about. And then a few years ago in the offseason, Coach K took his staff to Dallas when Garrett was coaching the Cowboys to hang out during training camp and kind of see how they do things. And So there's a connection there. That's where that comes from. And in the end, I don't think it's going to be him, to be honest with you. I think they're going to get one of these college coaches, either Tony Elliott or Mike Elko or one of the head coaches they talked to, maybe. But Garrett is somebody I heard came up. This was weeks ago that he might be somebody they want to get involved with, and then my understanding is he is interested in the job, and so he kind of resurfaced again after we went through this. That I thought he'd kind of fallen off the radar, and then he has pushed himself back into contention a little bit.
Steve, what are you hearing? I mean, here's a Duke team that was 0-8 in the conference, 3-9 on the season. Real disappointment this year for Duke in a tough ACC. What are they looking for in a coach? I mean, there's got to be certain things that they did not like before that they want to have present. I mean, obviously, recruiting has to, like we mentioned earlier, be a key component. But you mentioned a couple of people, but if you had a look or if you had a crystal ball, who would you say, and I know you mentioned a couple of guys just now, but who do you think would be the best fit for this job?
Yeah, I think Mike Elko from the defensive coordinator at Texas A&M, who has a background. He coached at Notre Dame before he came there. He coached at Wake Forest. He spent 12 years with Dave Clawson on some different staffs. He played football at Penn, again, Ivy League, knows the academic, what's asked of students at a high-level academic institution. I know, and I was on another show earlier and asking about Tony Elliott at Clemson. I think he'd be a great fit too. I mean, he went to Clemson. He was all academic, all ACC, got postgraduate scholarship in industrial engineering major. He's a great coach. Duke has an African-American female athletic director who was just hired a few months ago. Diversity inclusion, obviously, is very important to her and opening doors for people. Tony Elliott, if he's hired, would be the first African-American or first person of color to be a head coach of Duke football. So that would be something important to the university. That's opening those doors for people. So I'm kind of giving you two answers here. I think Elko would be great. They're both really good coaches. Either one would be great, to be honest with you. I'm giving you reasons why both of them would be good choices if it's one of those two coordinators.
And what do these coaches, I mean, when you're looking at it, North Carolina, I mean, just in North Carolina alone, when you're looking at North Carolina, you got Duke, you got NC State, Wake Forest, what an unbelievable year they had, Clemson not too far down the road. I mean, what is it about Duke that the incoming head coach has to do to attract recruits there?
Yeah, it's a difficult place to recruit to. There's no question about it. And normally, David Cutcliffe, his tenure ended poorly, but he got it going there for a while. He went to bowl games in 6 out of 7 years during one stretch. He won the Coastal Division. He recruited guys that ended up in the NFL. They had 4 guys drafted last April, the most they've ever had in one draft. So he was getting talented players. They just weren't, they weren't playing very well. They weren't playing as a team. They were playing terrible on defense. So what this guy's got to do, the new guy that comes in, has to keep the inroads in the state. Duke can't recruit, obviously, some kids that North Carolina or NC State can recruit. They just can't do it. They don't have the exceptions to get them into school. Wake Forest goes through the same thing. You're not going to, at Duke, you're not going to get to where you win 7, 8, 9 games every year. Every once in a while, you're going to have a dip because that's just the way the recruiting cycle is going to go. But what you can't have is what they had the last 2 years here where, 2-10, 2-9, 3-9, only winning 1 ACC game over 2 seasons. So you got to get enough of the 3 stars and maybe hit on a 4-star every now and again to have that talent base built up, to have quality speed. The speed's dropped off a little bit. That's one thing that David Cutcliffe told me this season, about halfway through. So you've got to get enough of those guys at the right positions, defensive back, wide receiver, running back, linebacker, to be able to compete, to win, to be, in the running for a bowl game just about every year.
Steve, one great thing that I saw this year from Duke, and I got to watch him a little bit, got to see him here, that unfortunately lost to Charlotte here, at the beginning of the season. But talk about Mateo Durant. What an unbelievable year, over 12 yards, 1,200 yards rushing. And a lot of people are saying, and I'd love to get your opinion because you obviously have watched him a lot more than me. They're saying that he could possibly be a very solid NFL running back.
I think he could. He's not tall. He's 5'11", but he's doesn't have much body fat on him at all. He is strong. He's a bull in there, and not like tremendous breakaway speed, right? But enough to where he can break a long run when he needs to. He gets through the hole quick. He set the school single season record for rushing this year. Started off, if you were at that Charlotte game, he got 255 yards in the first game of the year, and had those 2 long runs in the fourth quarter. I mean, he's just a very bright kid, hard worker, just tremendous. And whatever team brings him in, either by draft or by free agent, if it ends up being that, he's going to get in there and play special teams and do the right things. He's going to be caught doing the right thing a lot more than doing the wrong thing on and off the field. And so he's a fun kid. He was a fun kid to cover, and I hope he has a good NFL career because he's worked hard to get there.
We just witnessed here in Charlotte the Wake Forest Pittsburgh in the ACC championship. And before the year began, a lot of talk. Obviously, nobody expected Clemson to fall off like they did this year. A lot of people were expecting huge things from North Carolina and Sam Howell, who at the beginning of the year was a Heisman candidate. Then you had NC State that was ranked. I mean, when you see a team like Pittsburgh playing Wake Forest and, give all the credit in the world to Wake Forest this year, is that good having 2 different teams playing for the ACC championship, do you think? Is that good for the conference, or do you think it's not so good for the conference?
Well, I always think it's good to mix it up every once in a while and have new faces and people rise up, and beat people and move up. Like, NC State's the one that knocked off Clemson early in the ACC play anyway. They kind of knocked them off their pedestal and opened the door for Wake Forest to come in. And but in the big picture, they're not going to have anybody in the playoff. And we knew that when late September, early October, we knew the ACC was going to get shut out of the 14 playoff this year. And that's not good for the league. Like, you can't do that on the regular. Okay. If we have a one-off and this is what happens this year, okay, next year somebody needs to be back in there, because if you get too many years in a row out of that, that's a problem. And Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, has kind of thrown down the gauntlet to everybody in the league. Like, we need to make football even better than it has been, even with Clemson doing all they did, and Florida State before that. But we need multiple teams competing for the playoff every year, not just only one team that can possibly make it, or this year, none. So to answer your question, I think this year was a lot of fun that way, that Pitt and Wake it was a fun story to see those 2 in Charlotte playing, but it's better if you have one that's in there that's, 11-1 or 12-0 like Clemson normally is. And that they have to win that and they get in the playoff and can really make the ACC some money.
I'm going to let Zach go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, and 2 names that when I covered the Duke opening, like back on, I believe it was like in late September, and 2 names that were being mentioned a lot were Mike Houston at ECU and Jeff Monken at Army. The two head coaches there, both been very successful, and Monken's been a top candidate for multiple jobs, especially that Kansas job that opened up last spring. For you, have you heard anything about either of these 2 candidates? And 2, would either of these candidates be a great fit for Duke in the long run?
I think Houston could have been. I really do. And his background with having been at the Citadel, again, a place with academic, requirements. He won there. He was at Lenore-Ryan before that in Hickory. Then he went and won a national championship. James Madison, he's done a great job at ECU. And I know there was interest in Duke to have him part of the search. And he got a new contract at ECU almost immediately. As soon as Duke kind of expressed interest, so maybe he owes them a tip or something. I don't know. It helped him get some money. I think he would have been great. Jeff Monken would bring in the discipline and things that could help Duke turn it around. But I think there was just some trepidation about going full triple option, just going that route. I mean, there's there were people at Duke that thought that was a good idea, that, hey, we have to do something different, would be their approach, right? We can't get the recruit. We talked about recruiting earlier, right? Duke can't go out and get 5-star kids. That's not going to happen. They're lucky to get a 4-star. So, what Paul Johnson did at Georgia Tech worked for a long time. I mean, they went to an Orange Bowl triple option. They, routinely, were in bowl games. And you don't think Duke would like to be in that situation? Of course they would. They wouldn't go through what they did the last 3 years if they were in that situation. But there's also that, you got a high floor, but you got a low ceiling with the triple option. You're not going to compete for a conference championship probably in most situations. And so I think that's kind of what kind of turned him down, because Monken was more involved. It has been more involved in the search than Mike Houston was, because Houston got that new deal right away, and that kind of removed him. So,
yeah, and I mean, for the ACC as a whole, I know you cover like the entire conference as well. We saw the alliance this offseason between the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12. Does the Pac-12 and the ACC not getting teams in the playoff due to Alabama and Georgia both getting in, and then you had a Cincinnati get in, and if they didn't get in, a Notre Dame was going to get in, or a two-loss Ohio State. Does that increase the likelihood that the alliance is going to vote together on the playoff expansion and really try to push for playoff expansion happening sooner rather than later, due to almost the entire alliance not getting a team in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think they could. They very well. That's a good point. I think that's probably where they're heading with that, is to increase it to 8 or 12. I think maybe 12 would be probably the preference, right? I mean, I think we all would like to see 12, because more is better, right? And I think that would open up more spots. You'd be guaranteeing each of the Power Five would get at least one team in, and then possible more than that. And so that's what this is all about, is those three leagues kind of position themselves against the SEC, right? The SEC made that power play over the summer with Texas and Oklahoma, and all of a sudden, the Alliance conferences got together. It was like, let's slow this down again so we don't have mass chaos. We're all three we're agreeing not to poach each other's schools. We're going to stay together. We're going to try to vote as a block, us three against the SEC, to try to offset their power.
Right. And one of the big hires, of course, this week actually was Mario Cristobal coming down to Miami, and it kind of gives them a new face for their program. For you, as an outsider of Miami, but covering the ACC, what do you think about Cristobal coming to Miami, and how important is it for Miami, the Florida States, the quote unquote blue bloods of the ACC to return to prominence in college football?
Well, it's what Jim Phillips needs and the ACC needs. Is Miami hasn't been Miami since they've been in the ACC. They had the 1 year under Mark Richt, right, when they made that run and all that, and they won their only Coastal championship. They have as many as Duke. How about that? That's not the way this is supposed to work out. So yes, the league needs Miami to be back, and Florida State, Virginia Tech, and then Clemson, right? And so then you've got four. They can do all that stuff, and now Pittsburgh's kind of back up. I mean, they've had a better stretch of football in the past than they have recently. But as far as Mario Cristobal, I think in the end, it's really going to re-energize Miami. I think it's their best chance to really do something big. I thought when they got Mark Richt, that was a good hire. He was on the back end of his coaching career. Cristobal's in a better situation to be there longer and do more things. So I think that's great. I'm not a fan of how the whole thing went down. Yeah. That's a whole different conversation. It was terrible. It was terrible to Manny Diaz. I know it's his business and you got to take the emotions out of it, but that's not the way to run a railroad. And, if I'm Cristobal, I'm thinking, okay, I'm here. This is great. But I'd also be looking over my shoulder, like, what's going to happen, right? Because if they do it to you, they do it to him, they'll do it to you, right? So that wasn't cool at all. Yeah, but in the end, if they end up with he as their head coach, they end up with Dan Radakovich from Clemson as their athletic director, they've done pretty well. And in the end, that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I would say so. And also, I mean, looking back at Cristobal's time at FIU, his exit at FIU was highly controversial too after just being removed from a conference championship and kind of backdoored in that. So I feel like he should already have to look over his shoulder. And my last
Yeah.
question here, man, is, we saw the SEC, like you say, I'll try to quote, some people use the word monopolize college football by grabbing Texas and Oklahoma. There's been talks that that the Big 12 is not done, that they can potentially add Memphis and or Boise State in the near future. The Big 10 supposedly looking at adding teams as well. For you, looking at the ACC, even though it might not be now, are there any teams in the ACC's geographical footprint that you would like to see maybe in 2-3 years move up to the ACC?
I haven't. The only thing that came to mind before was UConn because of their basketball. Like if the ACC added Notre Dame, they only need one more, right, to get 16, and UConn's in the footprint. Their football is so atrocious, though.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. So everything else, they took a step back. And then I'm talking 3 or 4 years ago when Notre Dame came in partially. We were thinking, who's going to be the 16th? Maybe UConn, right? That they'd fit right in there. No. So that's in that idea. So, but really, there's not many other schools that fit what the ACC does. And they went with Louisville kind of against their better judgment. They went to, it's the athletics, obviously. That was an athletic move. It wasn't an academic move. Louisville doesn't rank up there with the other ACC schools in all those rankings of academic prowess. And, Louisville's been a consistent thorn in the side of the NCAA ever since they came in the ACC. They've been kind of an embarrassment, right? They're kind of that weird cousin, you sit at the other table at Thanksgiving, right? So I say all that to say that they've already kind of taken that step with that, bringing them in. So maybe eventually a school like, I know Central Florida is going to the Big 12, but they would be in the footprint, right? That'd give you another, bring more eyeballs in Orlando, a big market. Talking about ACC needs to increase revenue. They need more big markets, right? If Villanova could ever do something with football, they would ever decide.
They're in the FCS playoffs this year. They made the quarterfinals, so I guess they're making small progress.
Maybe so, but that would, Philadelphia would be a great market for the ACC to snag, right? But yeah, there's not a whole lot out there really.
And I know there were some people that mentioned maybe depending on the trajectory, because we're talking years out, that Appalachian State and Coastal Carolina, if they continue their slow improvement, could potentially be candidates. But I do think, like you said, both of those programs have a long way to go, maybe outside of the football aspect of sports, to get into the ACC, because you've got to be able to play basketball if you're going to come into the ACC.
No question about it. Yeah, it'll be ugly. And we've already seen programs come in that were decent before. Boston College was a decent basketball program at one time, right? Yeah. Pittsburgh was top seeded, multiple times in the NCAA tournament, and are a number one seed, and they're down at the bottom. So yeah, if you come in and think, okay, we're okay here in basketball, you're going to find out real fast. You got to really be something to run in this league, and so yeah, teams that are even below that, like you said, App or Coastal, that would be really bad. So, but the ACC's TV rights deal is up in 2036. There's a long time on that.
Yeah.
And a lot of things are going to happen between now and then. Nothing can really happen before then because of the grant of rights deal. But the distance between the ACC and the Big Ten and the SEC in revenue distribution is wide, and it's getting wider all the time. So I think within 10 years, we're going to see more changes. Even though the TV deal isn't up and everything, something may have to happen. They may have to force something to happen. Get somebody before you need somebody, because they're falling behind, and it's not going to. The Big Ten and the SEC aren't going to stop.
Steve, I want to ask you one last question before I let you run, and it's not necessarily related to football, but it is related to Duke. A real special time to be at Duke right now. Would it be in the last season? Coach K is going to be coaching at Duke. Unbelievable career there. I know you can't get a home or an away ticket for under $100 right now to see a Duke basketball game this year. talk about Coach K. Talk about the atmosphere on Duke. They know he's leaving, and talk about the legacy that Coach K is going to leave behind.
Yeah, I mean, he's made Duke basketball what it is, and they had a basketball program, a pretty good one, before he got here. In 1978, they played for the national championship, lost to Kentucky 2 years before he arrived on campus. So they weren't devoid of basketball history, but he made them one of the true blue bloods, one of the top 3 or 4 programs in the country. When you throw it out, UCLA, Kentucky, whatever you want to, North Carolina, obviously. So that's his legacy, and he's done it, without a bunch of hints of scandal, of NCAA problems, all that. And people say what they want about, it was overlooked or whatever. But I mean, the bottom line is a lot of schools have had a lot of problems in the last 40 years, and Duke ain't one of them. So he's got a legacy of doing things, for the most part, the right way. And that's important. As far as the atmosphere around the team, everybody wants to, the goal every year at Duke is to win the national championship. That doesn't matter if it's last year or not. The fact that it is his last year adds to that, right? And, John Shire is here. His assistant's already on staff. He's the one doing the recruiting for next year's team. Coach K is just focused on this year's team 100% ever since the announcement in June. He was able to stay on campus all summer long. When those kids came in June, they were in the gym. You can work with them a certain number of hours a week is allowed by the NCAA. He was in there every minute of those hours, which is unusual. Usually he's out on the road recruiting. He didn't have to do that. So that gave this team an advantage that a lot of Duke teams don't have. And that's why they can open the year and beat Kentucky in a tough game, and they can beat Gonzaga. I know they lost to Ohio State a couple nights later, but bottom line is they're a more cohesive team now than they would have been normally. And it is every Duke game in Cameron is an event anyway, but it's like multiplied by 10 or 12 or 14, whatever this year, because the tickets are so hard to come by. And I know as we get into ACC play, we're going to see more and more celebrities make their way into games. I mentioned earlier Jason Garrett coming to games when he was a coach of the Cowboys. So it happened before, but I'm talking about like a couple of years ago when Zion was here and Spike Lee was up there and LeBron came to a game and Obama and people like that. Like that, you get that level of celebrity in games in Cameron on the regular. And it's just going to add to the atmosphere and make it even more fun.
Yeah, and they're off to a 7-1 start, like you said. Only loss came, unfortunately, to Ohio State. Well, Steve, we want to thank you so very, very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us on a College Football Tuesday show tonight.
Thank you for having me on. Glad to be with you.
All right, you stay safe now.
You too.
All right, great guy, works for the sports writer at the Durham Herald Sun. Let's take a quick 10-second break to allow our stations to identify themselves. And we come back, we're going to actually recap some of the games that allowed the top 4 teams to get ranked where they are now. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. I'm Larry Frank along with Zach McKinnell, and we're a couple minutes away from having Brent Young from who covers the Cincinnati Bearcats on with us. That should be fun. But let's go ahead before we get him on. Let's try to quickly get in one of these recaps before we get to the Cincinnati game. This game, Alabama-Georgia, the game everybody was talking about. Can somebody beat Georgia? Well, I think it was a clear answer. And when I look at this game, Zach, I wrote a bunch of notes down here. Want to make sure I got the right pages here. But when I look at this game, okay, for those of you folks that do not think Bryce Young before this game deserved the Heisman Trophy, will you please speak up now and let me know if you still think that? What a great game. 400 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, another 40 yards rushing, 1 touchdown against the number 1 defense. And, when you look at this game, and I want to summarize it real quick because I want you to give your opinions on it. Georgia started off a quick 10 points. And then in the second quarter, it was Bryce Young taking over, hit Jamison Williams for that 67-yard touchdown pass. Then the next drive, he hit John Mechie for a 13-yard touchdown. Fortunately, Mechie got hurt. But when you look at this game, okay, and you can break down a lot of statistics. You can give Bryce Young all the credit you want. You can give Mechie and Williamson all the credit you want. You can give some of Alabama's defense all the credit you want. But I think the folks are missing none of that. Well, it was all part of the win. But I think the most impressive thing to me, and please, you watch football like I do, was the way that Alabama offensive line controlled the front of the defensive line, the number one defense in all of college football.
Yeah, real quick, Brent needs to link to the show. He just messaged me on Twitter.
Oh, I sent him
He
it.
needs to he said he never got it.
Okay, let me send it to him now.
Yeah, he just messaged me on Twitter, but I'll recap the game while you do that. But yeah, I mean, for me, the one thing that I noticed, the number one thing was Stetson Bennett. You got that's not the answer. A quarterback of Georgia wants to be a national championship contender. 2, Bryce Young clinched the Heisman, man. Like you said, 3 touchdowns, over 400 yards passing. Also had a rushing touchdown, and then on top of that, Alabama's offensive line issues just seemed to be solved out of nowhere. The offensive line clicked, and they were the first team to honestly win both line of scrimmages against Georgia. They slowed down that rushing attack, and they absolutely just seemed more physical, stronger, and they played one of their best games of the year. And on top of that, the 2 players that impressed me most this weekend outside of Bryce Young, one, Brock Bowers for Georgia. This kid is a freshman, and he had a hell of a game. I believe he won SEC Freshman of the Year this year. 10 catches, 139, and a touchdown. It was unstoppable. And then, of course, Jamison Williams, man, 7 catches, 184 for 2 touchdowns. They were bracketing Jamison Williams because he's so fast. So they always had a safety over the top of him, along with someone underneath. Bryce Young was fitting it in there, and even though the safety was over the top, he was beating him to the corner. I don't know how fast you have to be to do that, but all these Georgia DBs are athletic, but he was just too fast, man. And it was impressive for me to see this Alabama offense pick apart the Georgia defense like they did. They consistently ran the ball well. Like I like the comment by our guy John there. The Bama deep ball really opened up the run game for Alabama. They just wore out UGA's defensive line. And for me, Nick Saban proved again why he's one of the best coaches, probably the best coach of all time in college football history, man. The game plan was working, and he knew that if he put the game in Stetson Bennett's hands, there was no way Alabama was going to lose this game, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I'm just typing this real quick. He should be on any second. My bad there. Okay, so he's got it to every which way now. So I just sent it. I thought I sent him it. I guess I didn't. Just reading some of the emails here. All right, okay. Anyway, but a big win, and I'm sorry I was over there, so I missed some of that. But yeah, and we're going to break down Alabama versus Cincinnati a little bit later. But, like I said, you got to give Alabama credit. Bryce Young, I mean, what can you say? I don't think there's a question who's going to win this. And we're going to also talk about the Heisman finalist list, the 4 people that are going to New York a little bit later as well. But the next game we're going to talk about, let me see if I could. There it is Cincinnati versus Houston. And it is my great pleasure to bring in now Brent Young, who is a contributor to Bearcat Journal. He covers the Cincinnati Bearcats. Let's go ahead and bring him up. Sorry about that, Brent. I thought I went ahead and sent it. I guess I didn't hit send. But I got to ask you this question. I've been thinking about you since this game, and Go through what you were thinking and what you initially done. Talk about that unbelievable run, 79-yard touchdown run by Jermaine Ford.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me back on. Always a pleasure to be here talking Cincinnati sports, Bearcats, big time. But, that run by Jerome Ford is one that we're kind of used to at Cincinnati. He's broken, I'd say, probably at least 5-6 runs, 50 yards or more so far this season. Of course, he had that big run last year in the Peach Bowl against Georgia. So, when he burst through, I saw a little space. I said, he's going. And he took it all the way. He's a big time player. And that's the story inside of a story against Alabama. Obviously, he transferred there. If you watch the broadcast, the broadcasters will tell you that about 10 times throughout it. They'll say, Alabama transfer Jerome Ford. But no, he's a spectacular player. This team is very special. It's one of those seasons where I'm an optimist. I'm going to be the first to admit it, but there weren't many games that I was ever very concerned about. Even Notre Dame, they started the season out kind of a little iffy. They had a lot of things they needed to work out. Going into that game, I had a little bit of nerves, but it was a season all year where I kind of just felt comfortable every single game, and that even continued on Saturday with the slow start back and forth. It was touchdown, field goal, touchdown, going back and forth against each other. But still, I felt like Houston was a team that was going to give them a fight in the beginning, but one that I thought Cincinnati was going to show what they could do at some point, and they did there in the third quarter.
And, of course, you got Desmond Ridder, the guy that doesn't make many mistakes at all and always gives you a shot to win. But I think one of the things that really impressed me about that game over the weekend was that defense. Yeah. 8 sacks on Clayton Tune of Houston. Talk about, that defense came to play.
Yeah, they did. So Houston, they call their defensive line Sack Avenue. That's the nickname that they've given themselves. And I think, Luke Fickell preaches that this is a program that's built in the trenches. So I think when they heard the whole Sack Avenue talk and, all the success that they've had running the football, Houston that is, and all the success that Tune has had throwing the football recently, I think they kind of took it as they took it personal, to quote Michael Jordan, they took it personally. So they came out with a purpose and wanting to get after the quarterback. And, all season, they've never really faced a team that has kind of thrown the football until they faced like an SMU. And then Houston did it again, where they kind of aren't just trying to run the ball, pound the ball, eat clock off, kind of control the game. So when Houston shows that they're going to throw the ball around a little bit, those linemen and those linebackers can kind of peel their ears back and get after the quarterback a little bit more, because I think probably about 3 of those sacks were because of the coverage in the backfield. So, yeah, man, a lot of players on this team. I think there was 6 different players that combined for those 8 sacks. It's just, they're deep. They can get after it. They're experienced. I put that defense up the way they're playing right now against any other defense in the country.
Now, obviously the number one question is going to be to you. You just saw what Alabama did to Georgia over the weekend. Right. Just made them look like, not that good.
It was weird. It was.
Yeah, it was very weird watching. So let me ask you this, and of course it's going to be biased a little bit, but realistically, do you think the Bearcats have a very good chance of upsetting the Alabama Crimson Tide?
Of course, yes. Whenever you have Desmond Ridder at quarterback and whenever you have Luke Fickell, everyone talks about Nick Saban having a month to prepare for Cincinnati. Same could be said on the other side. Fickell's got that same amount of time to prepare for what Alabama's going to bring. I think the loss of Mechie is going to be huge. That's the strength that this Cincinnati team has. Their defensive backfield. They've got 2 corners that'll be drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds, and then a safety that'll be picked in probably the top 5 rounds. So you're talking, those are all NFL players back there, and now you take out Mechie out. Sure, Jameson Williams is phenomenal, but it's going to be Sauce Gardner on Jameson Williams. It's going to be then Kobe Bryant on whoever else they decide they're going to try and throw the football to a little bit more. So, and then once you stop the run a little bit, which they've been doing a lot better down the stretch, I think that side of the ball, you're really starting to kind of get a little bit of a push, and we'll see how it goes. But then you flip on the other side. I'm a little nervous about the pass rush and, just the overall strength that they have that Alabama has in the linebackers position and then across the line on that side. But I mean, Desmond Ridder, he is the third all-time winningest quarterback in the history of college football. And, that's one of the biggest intangibles that he has. He just wins football games. And if he does close his career out and win his next 2 games, he'll be the second all-time leading winner at the quarterback position in college football history. So, it's biased. There's no doubt about that.
And Zach, you can jump in here as well after and comment on what I'm about to say. But the one thing I noticed about Alabama, I mean, you can't take away the position at quarterback for them. Obviously, Bryce Young, incredible talent, incredible year. But I noticed with Alabama, and it might play into Cincinnati's favor, is they don't do very well against man-to-man coverage. They seem like they attack a lot better when a team is playing zone defense. And this falls in because I know one of the best teams in college football in man-to-man coverage is the Cincinnati Bearcats. Why don't you elaborate on that? Doesn't that really play into them?
Zach, are you the Bama enthusiast over here?
I mean, for me, I mean, if you look at the like I said on my college football when the rankings were released, I did a live stream. If I'm Luke Fickell in Cincinnati, I am taking Derek Mason's game plan from the Iron Bowl and replicating that to a T. Yep. Because I'm going to be honest, Roger McCreary had a career game, a man-on-man coverage against Jameson Williams and John Mechie. Of course, Williams ejected for targeting early in the second quarter, but Ahmad Sauce Gardner is better than Roger McCreary. And I'm an Auburn fan, Auburn alum, and I will die on that hill. Ahmad Gardner is way above anything Roger McCreary's given. And also, Cincinnati has a better overall secondary than Auburn has. I mean, most people can't even name Auburn's second corner. And you got Kobe Bryant, Derek Forrest. I mean, the list goes on and on in that secondary. So the key for me is if Ahmad Gardner can shut down just Williams, can Kobe Bryant do enough on Ja'Cory Brooks? Can he do enough on Slade Bolden? And the biggest test for me are going to be the linebackers and safeties for Cincinnati because you look at Jaleel Billingsley and Cameron Latu at the tight end spot. Huge aspects of this Alabama, passing attack. That's what killed Auburn in the second half is the linebackers just could not cover Latu and Billingsley on that stretch. And then, of course, Ja'Cory Brooks, the backup, hits that long, 40-something yard touchdown pass. It goes to overtime. But I do think John Mechie's injury helps because now you could tell Ahmad Gardner, number one, he doesn't go anywhere. But if they had Mechie, then Kobe Bryant would have a very tough. I love Kobe Bryant, but Mechie and Williams really gives Alabama a whole nother dimension. So if I'm Cincinnati, we're playing man press coverage on the outside, and you're going to have to beat us one-on-one. And this is going to be Ahmad Gardner's biggest test of his career. If he passes with flying colors, you're talking about a potential top 10, maybe top 5 draft pick at the corner spot. So this is really going to test. And this is the test I wanted to see last year, Ahmad Gardner missing the Georgia game last year. Yeah. This was the matchup I wanted to see with George Pickens. But Jameson Williams, Ahmad Gardner is the best matchups in the entire playoffs for me and talking about one-on-one player positional matchups.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, the interesting thing throughout the season this year, there's some good wide receivers in the AAC, and there's some really good tight ends. They played, Michael Mayer in the beginning of the year for Notre Dame, and they were able to somewhat control and contain him. And I'd say he's right up there with some of the best tight ends in the country. So, and that's the strength throughout the AAC has been the tight end position as well. Tulane's best receivers at tight end, and the teams don't really rank up to the level that Alabama is, but yeah, it's been kind of the mix of everyone. They don't really play the traditional 4 down linemen and then 3 linebackers and then 4 DBs. You've got 5 DBs on the field the entire time. A lot of people say Arquan Bush, who is their nickel corner, is the most fundamentally sound corner that they have on the team. So I think that the combo of those 3, and then if, like you said, if they can get the linebackers to really adjust and play well, but I think it means getting pressure on Bryce Young, and that's easier said than done. Although Alabama's weakness has been offensive line the entire season, and all of a sudden they play really well against Georgia. It was just a very very weird thing. But I kind of just see it as a lot of strengths playing towards Cincinnati's strengths, and it'll be who can come out on top of those matchups. And like you said, Sauce Gardner, if he would have been up against Pickens last year, that would have been the matchup to see. But Arquan Bush was on Pickens last year, and Pickens, he had a couple of good catches. It wasn't anything outstanding that he did. I think he got like 2 deep balls, 2 long jump balls. But aside from that, Arquan is pretty doggone good locking down that little slot position. So it's going to be exciting to see if Alabama decides that they're going to try and run the ball a lot, or if they're going to let Bryce just try and stay back there and throw. That'll be the chess match on that side of the ball. There's no doubt.
Go ahead. You have any other questions, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, it's just some like auxiliary questions too, just because you've covered Cincinnati. I think this needs to be talked about. I want to see from your perspective. One, a Cincinnati transfer that just recently transferred, and Tavion Thomas just put on a show out there in the Pac-12 for Utah, winning the Pac-12 championship. Can you kind of speak to when he got to Cincinnati? Did you notice that he could be as special as he's become in Kyle Winningham's program over there in Utah?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. He was one of the most physically gifted players that came in. And you just saw from the get-go, it's a Power 5 back who, somehow ended up at Cincinnati, and that might explain why he ended up leaving Cincinnati and going the JUCO route for a year, and then now heading out there to Utah. So, his past it's been talked about before, but he's a talent. He is an absolute talent. The Bearcats played at Ohio State a few seasons ago, and there were a couple of players that looked like they belonged on the field with Ohio State, because Bearcats weren't at the level that they're at right now during that game. And Tavion Thomas was one of those players. He's physical, he's fast, he's big, he's a big dude back there. Yeah, I mean, he was oozing potential in a running back room where he kind of had to learn how to share a little bit. Michael Warren was back there, Jared Dokes was back there, a lot of talent in the backfield. So yeah, he was a guy that we were flagging the entire season, saying, watch out for that Oregon game at Utah. It's going to be a former Bearcat helping out the Bearcats, and it ended up working out perfectly like that.
I mean, he single-handedly just about beat them twice. So I mean, he had one hell of a season. The other one too, this name is going to be associated with Luke Fickell in Cincinnati forever, and that's Marcus Freeman, named the Notre Dame head coach a year after leaving Cincinnati. I was really hoping Michigan lost so we could see a Notre Dame Cincinnati playoff game. That would have made my entire life in terms of storylines as a sports guy. But for you, was Marcus Freeman destined to be that head coach? And what do you think of the hire as of right now for Notre Dame?
Marcus Freeman is just the epitome of just a genuine guy. He's extremely genuine. If you watch the Dan Patrick highlight or the little clip where they asked him, "Hey, Marcus, what were you thinking when you're watching the games on Saturday?" Marcus was like, "I know I need 2 of 4 things to happen in order for Notre Dame to potentially, sneak into the playoff." And one of those 4 things was Cincinnati losing. And he said, no matter what, he wasn't going to root for that. He was not going to root for the Bearcats to lose, because he loves those guys, loves that team, loves that staff, and things of that sort. And it's all true. That's genuine to a T. And then you watch the highlight of him when he welcomes in the team, his first, entrance into the locker room. And I mean, he's gonna knock it out of the ballpark. He is just, I'm just a guy that works for a website, and he would always make time to walk over and just say hi and ask you how's everything going. He's one of the nicest guys, and I mean, he's just like Luke Fickell in that sense too. And just two guys that just get it. They can relate to anybody. He's going to be a master recruiter. He's already been one, and he knows that that's what wins football games is bringing in talent and then developing that talent. But you got to bring in the talent first, and so I love the move. It's going to be one that I think Notre Dame fans already do love. I think they wanted Fickle initially, and I knew that wasn't going to happen because Fickle is too dead set on focusing on what's in front of him. If the off season came and there was still no coach at Notre Dame, then who knows what route it would go. But when I saw Marcus's name getting tossed around, it was just a complete no brainer. I don't care how young he is. He can go into any living room and talk to any recruit, and you're going to leave that meeting with Notre Dame in your top 3 or top 5. So, I think he's going to do great.
And I don't think age was an issue. I mean, their offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, is 29.
Right. 29.
He's only like 4 years older than me. I mean, the guy is one of the youngest coaches in college football. And my last question, man, listen, Luke Fickell's legacy at Cincinnati is already set. Right now. Let's say the unthinkable to most people happens and he wins a national championship this year.
Right.
What is Luke Fickell's legacy at Cincinnati, and how long do you think I would build a statue the night of the national championship if that happened? But what is his legacy at Cincinnati if he gets it done this year?
I'd build a fake statue first because the fans in the city might party around it a little bit too hard and deface it a little bit on that first day. But no, it's crazy to think about what he's been able to do in his time there. The thing about Luke is he is constantly setting goals, accomplishing them, and setting new goals. I think he would tell you if they won the national championship this year, I think he'll tell you it's not good enough. I think he'll say we're a top 10 program right now, but we want to be a top 5 program. We want to be what everyone considers as the best of the best. And, I don't think it's out of the realm to say that he might be able to somehow pull it off. It's such a veteran team. It's such a team that has leadership at every single position. But the thing about him is yes, it'll happen. You will celebrate. You might celebrate for a little bit longer because now you got the off season. And then he's going to be like, but I'm off to recruiting in 2 weeks. So, his legacy would be, he's already a Cincinnati legend. It's a growing legend, but he's rooted here. He's loving it here, and he's making everyone, kind of joining the party and the fun with him. So if he does somehow pull it off, build that statue. Build that statue.
I like it.
No doubt.
And the last question for me, Brent, before I let you run, and we got about another minute and a half here. Talk about real quickly this season. Cincinnati being the first Power 5 school to be able to make the playoffs, get into the playoffs. This entire year being 13-0 right now, going into the playoffs. Talk about what this season means to Cincinnati Bearcats going forward.
It's only the beginning, man. You ask anyone on that staff, anyone on that team, if they expected this or if it's kind of a surprise to them. So no, they'll say no. This team, this program has no ceiling, and it's they have all completely bought into that, and it's a crazy thing to see when you can buy into that, your players to buy into it, and the culture starts to come with it. And then aside from that, the fans come with it too. I mean, every single game at Nippert Stadium has been phenomenal. It's been insane. This past Saturday, so I was at the 2020 AAC championship game when they beat Tulsa, but that was of course with 40% capacity or 30% capacity. So it was kind of like a team celebration. They had to do it organically. This past Saturday, the fans were able to be there with the team. The fans ran out onto the field, embraced the team, and it is just a crazy atmosphere that is just continuing to build. And you see recruits are buying in as well, and it's something that is really going to be, I think, not like, oh, we reached the top type ordeal. It's going to be, wow, we are climbing up rapidly, and we're not going to slow down. It's insane to see the pulse around the program. It's great. It's phenomenal.
Well, Brent, once again, I want to thank you very, very much for joining us on our College Football Tuesday show. And we want to wish the Bearcats the best of luck versus Alabama.
Thank you so much. I'm glad it worked out. I was getting nervous. I was like, oh no, he hasn't set the link yet, but we figured it out.
It was there. I just didn't hit the send button. So.
Sometimes, hey, it happens. Technology, man. Technology.
I know, man. All right, my friend. Stay safe, okay?
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Zach, another great interview. And what we're going to do is we're going to recap the last game out of the 4 teams. I know we had other games like Pitt, Wake Forest. Baylor won a big, huge game, which I, by the way, picked that they would. They won. But let's just hit on this Michigan-Iowa game. Let me see if I can find my there it is. Michigan-Iowa. There we go. 42-3. I mean, 28 unanswered points in the second half. The defense, I know they held them to 3 points, but it wasn't like they played an unbelievable game. I mean, it was just good enough to win. And when, of course you had Haskins, and then you had the kid, what was it, Blake Corum with that 75-yard run. I mean, but and then that big double pass in the game, a little trickery. But this was a game that Michigan dominated. Looks like they're getting ready for the playoffs.
Oh, man, listen, and I like, I mentioned on my show, the number one thing that my takeaway from like this perception of what happened is Jim Harbaugh betting on himself. He said, listen, everyone doubted me. Everyone said I should be fired. Everyone said this or that. So he said, take some money off my contract, lower my buyout, take some years off, put me on like coaching probation pretty much is what Michigan put him on. And he bet on himself and he won. And the one thing I did like is they weren't scared. They opened up with that Donovan Edwards pass where they ran like the tall sweep and then he throws it down the field for like a 70-yard touchdown pass, like a halfback toss pass to Roman Wilson. Love the play calling. But listen, Michigan is going to do 2 things. They're going to play tough defense. They're going to force you to try to become one-dimensional, and they're going to run the football down your throat until you hurt. And that's all they did, man. Listen, you mentioned it. Their offense didn't have like the most outstanding day. They ran for 200 yards and 4 touchdowns, but nobody had over 100 yards. And most of it was just chunk explosive plays by some unexpected contributors. You look at A.J. Henning with this 30-yard run. The Corum had a 67-yard run, averaged over 14 yards per carry. A jet sweep to Cornelius Johnson. Cade McNamara had a 15-yard run. It was really chunk yardage that got them there. So for me, the offense didn't play a spectacular game, and they're never going to be spectacular through the air. Cade McNamara is not that type of quarterback. But their defense is suffocating. David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson off the edges are a problem at the edge rusher spot. And I think ultimately, man, you finally saw all the recruiting, all the preaching that Harbaugh's been doing for years finally pay off in a big way with a huge Big Ten championship win.
So we talk about these 2 playoff games. Let's stay with Michigan a minute. Michigan is going to end up playing Georgia. Georgia, take away this game this weekend. Best defense possibly in college football, going up against another very good defensive team in Michigan. Now, Georgia doesn't impress me offensively, although they have been known to score some points. Bennett showed that he could make some mistakes last week when pressure is on him for Georgia. How do you see, Jim Harbaugh versus Kirby Smart matching up in this game?
I think both first-round matchups. I think in terms of matchups, I think they picked the best 2 first-round matchups. You have a run-first style in Michigan against a great front 7 in Georgia. It's strength versus strength, and I love to see that. And then, of course, you got both defenses. I mean, both offenses with QB question marks. Can Stetson Bennett overcome what he ran into in the SEC championship? Can Cade McNamara be more than a game manager? We're going to find out, but ultimately it's going to come down to which team can run the football. If either team becomes one-dimensional and their quarterback has to win them the game, that team's losing. There's just no chance in the world that K. McNamara or Stetson Bennett's going to be able to win either of these teams this game. It's going to come down to the 4 running backs that Georgia has between Zamir White, between Cook, between you can even go Kendall Milton might be back from injury. McIntosh. You have so many guys who can carry the rock for them. Or will it be the Donovan Edwards, the Blake Corums, the Hassan Haskins? Which team will be able to establish their will on the other? For me, that's the key to this game, is who can run the football, because neither quarterback is a national championship winning quarterback. So you better run the football on December 31st, I believe is when the game is.
Yeah. And, you switch avenues here and you go to the next game, the Alabama versus Cincinnati, and now you got a battle of 2 very good quarterbacks, Bryce Young and Desmond Ridder. Ridder doesn't make a lot of mistakes. You can't say much more about Bryce Young, but, if Cincinnati has a chance, 2 things are going to have to happen. We talked about the blueprint versus Auburn, like you mentioned. I don't think there was a better team this year that played defense against Alabama than Auburn did that night in a game. I'll still say it. I know it still hurts, but they should have won. Okay, they had them on the ropes and just didn't work out the right way. But nevertheless, the other thing is, I believe Cincinnati knows they can play, but there is still that factor of them going in playing Alabama and Nick Saban. I think it's going to be real important for them to get on the board quickly to build that confidence that we can play against these guys. And not only can we play against them, we probably could have a chance to beat them if our defense holds up and plays that great man-to-man as they are known to do.
Yeah, for me, I said this on my live stream, and John's in the chat, and I believe he was tuned in. The key for me for Cincinnati is this game needs to be 10 points or closer going into the fourth quarter. If you have a shot and you're only down 10 going into the fourth quarter, that's where you have a chance. They have to keep it close. If they get down by more than 14, I don't see this game going well for them. And you mentioned the quarterback battle, but for me, the matchup to watch, like we've already talked about, Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant, Derek Forrest. This secondary against Jamison Williams, Latu, Billingsley, Slade Bolden, Ja'Cory Brooks, you can go on and on. That matchup's going to determine everything. If they can slow Bama's passing game down like Auburn did, and their front 7 can hang on just enough in the run game where they can make them somewhat one-dimensional, that's going to be the key for Cincinnati. And also, Desmond Ridder just has to be a playmaker. He has some athleticism with his legs. When things break down in the pocket, you could not take 10 to 15-yard losses against Alabama and become in 2nd and 20, 2nd and 15. That is going to get you killed against this Alabama defense. If they get pressure, find a way to get the ball away safely, or get out of the pocket and go get 3, 4, 5 yards, or maybe even break 1 or 2 with your legs. Desmond Ridder is that type of athlete. That is that is the key for Cincinnati if they have any chance of winning this game. And it's already low, man. They're 15-point underdogs right now, I believe. It's going to take a heroic effort, and they're going to have to play a perfect game Larry. Let's just be honest. Those slow first half starts cannot happen this week in a few weeks against Alabama. If you get down 14, 21-0 in the first quarter, let's just go ahead and pack it up. You might as well TiVo the game and go ahead and go get you some dinner, because there's going to be no point in watching if Bama gets up by that much.
But let's also remember, exception this past week where they just dominated, a lot of the games that Alabama have won, they've been by a touchdown or less. Auburn, Florida, just to name 2. There was more. But so you never know on any given day. You never know what could happen. But I do think Alabama is the stronger team, obviously. But we'll see what happens.
I had someone tell me, on my live chat, that Cincinnati winning on the 31st would be a bigger upset than App State over Michigan in 2007. That's how confident a lot of people are that Bama's going to win this game.
Yep, but that's why they play the game. Let's take a quick 15-second break. We'll come back with the Heisman list, and we'll wrap it up. You are listening to Frankly Speaking Panthers on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports College Football Tuesday. And you know, Zach, as we get to this Heisman list, I've been calm the whole show. I've been pretty calm. I haven't got excited, where I've gone off, but the show's not over yet. Okay? And I want you to explain something to me. They are allowed to put 3 to 6 people who can be invited to New York. Correct?
Yeah.
Anywhere from 3 to 6 people, I think it is. And when the Heisman voting, this is how it breaks down. 928 electors. 870 of them are college media members. 51 are the living previous Heisman Trophy winners. Then 1 fan vote. Okay? And I want to know how somebody with these statistics, how the hell you can't invite this guy. Okay, now listen to me. I know Bryce Young is winning the Heisman Trophy. That would be a bigger upset than Cincinnati beating Alabama if he does it. Okay? But invite this kid to New York. Let's look at these stats. 1,600 yards, 6.2 average, 18 touchdowns, 8 games over 100 yards, 2 games over 200 yards. One of those games over the 100 yards was 197 yards. I know he didn't play much in the Ohio State game, which could have hurt him. But at the end of the day, I don't want to discredit any of the finalists. But for somebody to look me in these eyes, this is the reason why I hate the media being involved in things that happen in sports. Because they don't know the damn thing, some of them, about when a player deserves something and when they not. How can you look me in the face, look me in the eyes, and tell me, go ahead, tell me this guy does not deserve to go to New York?
I just came off my live stream where I said he should have. I thought him and Will Anderson got snubbed, in my opinion. Both of them, you mentioned all the stats for Kenneth Walker. He was the best running back in the country. I mean, top 10 in the NCAA in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, top 2 in the Big Ten in both of those statistics. Top 2 in the Big Ten in both those statistics. For me, I think the biggest critique, I think they should have invited, like you said, I think every year it should be consistent. You should have 5 to 6 people, that range. Inviting 4 is a little tough, in my opinion. But Kenneth Walker should have been there, the best running back. He's been one of the Heisman favorites all year. Yes, it's a sure thing Bryce Young's winning it. But if your argument that this guy shouldn't have been invited is that Bryce Young has sealed it, I think that, and then why invite anybody? Just give him the trophy on the field in Atlanta after the SEC championship. Kenneth Walker did enough to deserve that experience, especially as a transfer out of Wake Forest. Fought his way to a starting job at Michigan State, and I thought he had a great season. But for me, I still don't know how Aiden Hutchinson got invited. I really don't. When you pull up his stats right here, I have them. 58 tackles, 15 and a half, like you said, tackles for loss, 14 sacks. How is that better than Will Anderson in the SEC having 82 tackles, 27 and a half tackles for loss, 15 sacks, and was number 1 in the country in tackles for loss and sacks for the entire year by a significant margin?
That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't make sense. And how don't you see this? You got to be able to see this. They got these things, and, because I really think it becomes more of a popularity contest in some aspects. Bryce Young deserves all the credit he gets, please. But, Aiden Hutchinson, when I saw him, I was so surprised. I thought Kenneth, now, if you want to pick a defensive guy, I understand, okay? But like you said, the gentleman you mentioned, much, I won't say better. Better's not the right word, but should have had definitely the opportunity over Aiden to go there. But Aiden plays for Michigan. He plays for the Wolverines. And
I don't think it's because he plays for Michigan. I just don't think they wanted to have the Bama argument again, that the Bama bias or everything with 2 Alabama players out of the 4. I think they wanted to have 4 people from 4 different schools. Honestly,
but that's the media playing into the damn politics of college football. If you deserve it, I don't care who you belong to. You either A, deserve it, or B, you don't deserve it. And you're right. You are 100% right. This is wrong. And, but there's Aiden Hutchinson. Let's go over the other 3, and I want you to briefly.
Also like the comment by John, if you want to pull that up, because that's exactly how I feel about the Heisman race, about who should win. Let me see.
He must have just put it on there. Where is it? Oh, you're talking about the Pickett one?
Yes. I think Kenny Pickett has a great argument to win it, but he's not going to because he played at Pitt.
Exactly. And you know what? When you look at Kenny Pickett's 67, let me see if I got Kenny right here, because I put it up. This is me just being ready for you, buddy. Let's see. There it is. All right. Kenny Pickett, 67.2 pass completions, 4,300 yards. There's only one quarterback, I think, with more, and it's by 7 yards, is
and it's Bryce Young.
42 touchdowns right there with Bryce Young,
and
7 interceptions. So how do you invite one guy with very similar statistics there and you don't invite another? It doesn't matter to me who wins here.
Well, Pickett got invited.
What?
Pickett got invited.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pickett is invited. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. He's one of the 4. That's why I have his stats. But
yeah.
This is a guy that when you look at different rankings of quarterbacks, he's always on the top, the top 3 guys in college football, and it surprises you. And like I said, don't know if he plays with Pittsburgh. He doesn't get as much notoriety, but Pittsburgh's in the ACC now, so he needs to get somebody there, sports information director or whoever, needs to do their job a little bit better promoting this guy, because he's an unbelievable talent.
Well, if I asked you, if I took those 4 letters after Kenny Pickett's name on the banner and replaced them with Clemson and made those stats, the Kenny Pickett's the starting quarterback at Clemson, they win the ACC title with those stats, do you think it's a surefire pick for Bryce Young still? Or do you think he would have had more hype because he played at Clemson?
I definitely think he would have had more hype. I don't know. Why did I don't know. It's hard to say because of the year Clemson's having. Well,
I'm talking about if you put Pickett on their team and they won the ACC.
I'm sorry. I thought you just meant on the
so
team.
If you had an ACC championship Clemson, I think Pickett would have been right there with Bryce Young in any media conversation. But because he plays at Pitt, because they got upset by Western Michigan week 4, a lot of people are just kind of ignoring him. But I think Pickett had the harder job compared to Bryce Young all year long. If you put Bryce Young on Pitt, I don't know if he has the same statistics, because I don't think anybody can anybody other than maybe us or John in the chat name a Pitt wide receiver? Probably not. Can you name the Pittsburgh running back? There's probably people out there, to be honest with you, that voted for this that can't even name the head coach of Pittsburgh right now, to be completely honest with you. And so I think it hurt. And I like the comment John put there. If Pickett's last name was Manning, then ESPN would never stop talking about him. If it was Kenny Manning and he was the son of Arch or the son of whatever Manning, they would have never stopped. And for me, man, the last thing I'll say about this is I think Pickett's the best quarterback going into next year's draft. Over Matt Corral, over Sam Howell,
no doubt about it.
Ritter. I think Kenny Pickett is literally the prototypical quarterback you want. And I compared him on my show to Justin Herbert. He's the 6-year guy who has a ton of experience. Has the biggest stature in terms of quarterback. He has just as strong an arm as anyone else. And he did it at a school that typically isn't a pass-first team like Herbert did at Oregon. And so what's going to happen, I think, is just what happened in Herbert's class. We're going to have a Corral and a Howell go before him, and he's going to fall into a lap of a perfect situation. And you're going to see Kenny Pickett potentially be Rookie of the Year like you saw Herbert, in my opinion.
Yeah, and let's not forget, people just don't. I mean, even though they saw it over the weekend, he led his team to the ACC championship and won it. They are the ACC champions. Okay, people, it just doesn't sound like it with Pittsburgh. It doesn't. When we say the 1 week, it doesn't sound sexy or something. Whereas a Bryce Young of Alabama does, and I agree with you with Pickett. What year is Pickett this year?
I think he's a 5th or 6th year senior.
So he could enter the draft this year.
Yeah, well, he's going to. He has to. I don't think he has any
he's done.
eligibility.
I mean, he doesn't have the. Well, I meant with the COVID, he doesn't have another year, right?
Yeah, I don't believe so.
Yeah, but he's going to definitely be up there. And I'll tell you what, you look at there's some quarterbacks that he's going to go, may surprise you, may go before in the draft that you would not normally think Kenny Pickett would go before. But Kenny Pickett's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the draft. And I agree with you. It's a tough argument. It's always a tough argument when you have somebody that ties or is just as good as somebody from an Alabama or Clemson to say they're going to win. It's just you're fighting a lost cause. There's politics involved in it, media hype. But at the end of the day, he should definitely be mentioned in the same sentence as Bryce Young.
Yeah, the biggest problem too is you hear media, and I mean I've used it on my show too. You've heard the term Heisman moment. If I had to ask you to pick out a time where Bryce Young just blew you away, you could point to the Auburn comeback. You could point to last week picking apart Georgia all game long. But the problem with playing at Pitt is if I asked you when Kenny Pickett, blew you away, you really wouldn't have one of those like prime time moments against an elite team. And so that really hurt Pickett, I think, in the long run. But ultimately, it's just going to go down as another time where a player who probably was better, you look at Toby Gerhardt at Stanford, Ndamukong Suh at Nebraska, losing to Mark Ingram at Alabama. You look at, there's hardly ever a year where I think the last time it happened was RG3 at Baylor, a guy on a losing team who actually put up crazy stats, won the Heisman when he should have. Most of the time it goes to the best player on the best team, and that's why you're going to see Bryce Young take home the trophy. And I'm not saying Bryce Young doesn't deserve it to a point, because Bryce Young had an outstanding year, but I do agree that Bryce Young had a much easier path. Like, what happens if you give Kenny Pickett, Jamison Williams, and John Mechie all year long? I mean, just imagine.
A great receiver will always make your quarterback look a lot better, just like a great quarterback will make your receivers look a lot better. But that's not Pickett's fault. He doesn't choose who his teammates are. And that's the one thing about being at Alabama. You're going to get those 5-star wide receivers, where at Pittsburgh, you still have a chance at a 5-star, but you're going to get a lot of those 4 stars, right? So it's just unlikely you get a 5-star at Pittsburgh. And, you got to give this guy credit. He's catching Dan Marino at Pittsburgh. It's unbelievable. The greatest quarterback to ever play at Pittsburgh, Dan Marino. So, and you look at the stats. We're talking about Bryce Young, guys. Let's go ahead and pull up and watch how close. We'll just go ahead and mention what Zach is saying. There it is, Zach. Okay, 68%. He was 67. 4.32. Actually, he has less yards by a couple. Pickett has 4.329. He has 7 more yards passing than Bryce Young. So just say that. 43 touchdowns to 42 touchdowns. The only difference, really, 4 interceptions for Bryce Young, 7 interceptions for Kenny Pickett. But I think you hit the nail right in the coffin when you said Heisman moment. The guy is a TV, guru. He's on TV. He's in that big game. He makes the big plays. Even when he doesn't play well in that Auburn game, you would think that he had the best game of his career, by the way people talk about that. He had a crappy game until it came down to where they really needed him. But how you handle adversity helps you here too. And just, hey, it's a great argument, buddy. And one that is definitely right about the name of the school does make a big difference. And the name of the school also makes a difference here. Look at CJ Stroud, a very good year, 70.9% pass completion, 38 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 3,800 yards. I mean, great quarterbacks. CJ Stroud. I want to make sure you're clear. I'm not saying the 4 guys, maybe Aiden Hutchinson, okay? But the Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Kenny Pickett all deserve an invitation to New York. I don't necessarily like 3 quarterbacks going. I mean, maybe narrow it down to 2, but they all deserve it. I want to make sure that's clear. But like you said, the young man you mentioned earlier, I don't remember who it was that you said.
Will Anderson.
Anderson. And Kenneth Walker, should have been 2 more people invited, at least for the experience. It may not mean to much to many people in New York, but at the end of the day, think about what it means to those kids to experience the invitation of being a finalist at the Heisman Trophy announcement, which is, I believe, this Saturday, right?
Yeah, Saturday.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. You and I can't control it. We can just complain about it, and it's never going to change. If you want to win the Heisman Trophy, go to Alabama or Clemson, okay? Or even Georgia. Herschel Walker won it there. So, maybe even Florida, right? So who knows? But at the end of the day, points very well validated what you said. I know we're running out of time here. It's been a fun year. This is actually the last College Football Tuesday show Zach and I will be doing. Obviously, the playoffs are not until December 31st, with the conclusion of the season being January 10th, when the championship game is held. But it's been a fun year, and throughout the next 3 or 4 weeks, if we have something that breaks out in the news of college football, we'll definitely have Zach, make a guest appearance on Frankly Speaking Sports. But buddy, it's been a fun year. I've enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Hey man, I definitely appreciate you having me, man. I remember when you reached out to me, I was like, man, no question, I'll come on here, man. So we'll have to do it again next year.
All right, buddy, and we'll once again the off season goes pretty quick, as you know. But anytime you need to come on, talk whatever it's about, you always have an open invitation.
For sure, man.
All right, that'll conclude our telecast for tonight. Want to thank everybody throughout the year that supported College Football Tuesday. You can still catch Zach on the Blue Bloods at the _Blue Bloods on Twitter. And you can, of course, we will still be doing a Tuesday night show, but we will just do a regular Frankly Speaking Sports show. On behalf of myself and Zach McKinnell, thank you all very much. Until next time, we will see you. Have a great holiday, and everybody out there, be safe. Good night.